Talk to us. Why should we vote? Why should Native people vote?
Well, first thing we got to make sure we mention, and I want to make sure I mention, is that you don't have to. When I knock on doors in Brantford, and there's a lot of folks from Six Nations who are living in Brantford, and a lot of times they'll say, well, I don't vote. And I say, I respect that, because it's conscientious objection. It's not, like when I talk to some people say, oh, voting, I'm too busy, or voting, I don't care, or voting, I don't know. It's actually a reasoned choice, and I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I also know that there are a lot of folks on Six Nations that do vote. And I know from the last election, when we got a conservative majority, that there are a lot of people, especially younger people, who said, yeah, you know what, next time I am going to vote. And a lot of them reached out to me. A lot of folks I went to high school with, I went to Assumption, right, with a lot of folks who reached out and said, we need some change. And I know some folks have the idea that, and I'm not going to disagree with it, that, there's an element of revoking of some part of citizenship in order to be a part of a...
That's a big kind of stigma that's going on out here.
Well, and actually, you know what? It's something that's been pushed by the government as well, because they don't want First Nations to vote. They don't want Indigenous votes because they tend not to vote for them, the current government. And so, I'll give you an example. We had a lady who came in and said, I don't want to lose my Mohawk citizenship if I vote. And the very first question, we said, okay, we talked to her, explained how that's not what happens, and that you have a franchise that you're allowed to use, and there are some practical things that can happen if you do vote. But we go onto the Elections Canada website, and the very first question to register her says, are you a Canadian citizen? And she's saying, well, yes, but no, and I don't want to, and it says revoking all other citizenships. And she said, well, no, that doesn't describe me completely, and was very perplexed and said, I have to go look into this, took a sign, but was like, I have to go look into this more before I decide. I get that. I also see how things like First Nations fire is underfunded, how First Nations, huge, when you talk to Chief Miller, myself and Gene Crowder, we were talking to Matt, and we went and we met with him, and you're more likely to die in a fire if you're Indigenous. And I went and did my master's up in Thunder Bay, and some of the fire issues that are there, huge. And in Peterborough, $75 per person, that's the per capita rate that they give them per year for their fire.
Wow.
Six Nations, $25.
Wow.
Right? With huge infrastructure compared to most First Nations, with huge issues when it comes to safety and fire and the rest.
Reservation in Canada, right?
Well, that's it. That's it. And it's completely underfunded. Shannon's Dream is another one that, Charlie Angus, myself, and others took a lead on when it comes to the NDP to say, look, education shouldn't be underfunded 70%. If you're in a provincial system, you get a full dollar per, let's say it's 100% of the funding. First Nations get about 70%. So 70 cents on the dollar to First Nation education. And guess what? First Nations' highest growing birth rate. Like, we need folks, even the Chamber of Commerce. You don't often think of the Chamber of Commerce as maybe an ally to First Nations, but they're saying, hey, conservatives, get off your butts and make sure that it's funded properly, because this is going to be the growing part of the workforce. And what are we doing? So there's all these things that are happening. And I have also talked to people at Six Nations, older people, who said, I voted. I don't feel any less Native, right? So I get the disparity there, and I'm if you don't want to vote, if you're dead set against it, hey, I'm not going to convince you to vote anyway. But if you are voting, I think that we're the best choice for having that ally, for making that change, and locally for really getting it. So.
Yeah.